Welcome to the Impact Effect Podcast. I've got an amazing guest today, and folks, you are going to be in for a treat. We have Nate Vance in the house, and Nate just got back from Ukraine, spent a couple years over there, and Nate also is JD Vance's first cousin. So JD Vance, who's coming into administration as the 50th Vice President of the United States. So we're going to dive into all aspects about the war. We're going to talk about the military. We're going to talk a little bit about politics, what it's like growing up with JD, being a part of that family, and how Nate is making such a massive impact in today's world. So please help me welcome Nate Vance.
Hey.
He's here.
A new experience for me, so I'm uncomfortable. I'm still getting used to it.
So why are you uncomfortable meaning a new experience? Is that because you've been in the trenches for the last couple of years?
Well, yeah. First of all, somebody's speaking English, so that's unusual for me. But no, just having lights and cameras. I've avoided the media for the last several years on purpose. So this is definitely a new thing.
Well, thanks for doing it with myself and joining Impact Effect Podcast, man.
No problem.
It means a lot. We ask all the guests this question to kick off the podcast, and we are not going to skip that for this episode because it's going to lead us into an amazing conversation. So, Nate, how are you providing impact in the world today?
So, it's relatively new for me. I mean, this is not something that I do all the time, go randomly travel to war-torn countries and then participate in said war, but once I was there, you meet human beings and you realize that it's real people. They're not chyrons on a news screen, right? They're human beings and they have kids and dreams and hopes, and they're in the fight of their lives right now. So I'm trying to help them, and I think that by virtue of helping them, I can even help our own country in ways, right? Lessons learned from those types of things can benefit us as much as it benefits them in the future. So that's
Totally.
what I'm trying to do.
It's interesting because over here in the United States, we haven't witnessed this, right? We haven't seen or experienced it. And what you just said kind of hit me in the heart. You know, there's families with hopes and dreams and had plans, and now they're in a country that's being attacked every other minute.
Yeah.
That's real, and that's real humans in real life that are at stake.
Yeah, no, I got a buddy that I saw just before I left, and his nickname is Alf. That's not his real name, but he's a big meathead, you know what I mean? So I hope he sees this, and I hope he hears me say that, but he's always lifting weights and taking protein powder. He's also a nuclear engineer, right? And then left that to be a machine gunner and fight in this war, you know what I mean?
Wow.
So, and there's, you meet guys on the front that are attorneys, teachers, you know what I mean? Like people that are really qualified to continue to contribute to society, even in the middle of a war. And Alf volunteered, right? So, and he spoke pretty good English. So he ended up being my kind of my English speaking Ukrainian chaperone for a lot of things. So
nice.
But he just wants to go retire to a cabin in the Carpathian Mountains and flirt with his wife and chase his kids around the house. And I can kind of get behind that. I don't want their kids to grow up without a dad. So that's kind of part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing.
So you just decided to go over to Ukraine. When was that? What was the driving force that pushed you over there? Obviously, you want to support. There's real humans. There's real life at stake. But you left the United States. Mm-hmm. I don't know the situation you were in, or if you were safe and comfy or in a job or corporate world. I don't know those details, but it was a lot more safe here.
Oh, 100%.
In any situation, probably.
Yeah.
And you decided to go over there and to help and to assist, not necessarily knowing how to navigate, to speak the language, what the expectations would look like. Like, tell us about that experience, man.
Yeah. Well, looking back on it, I'm an idiot. Right? Like that's like my plan was pretty much fuck it. I'll figure it out when I get there. But the reality wasn't, coming off of COVID, everybody was like, I don't trust the media. I didn't trust them. I kind of knew they were a little bit full of shit.
Just a little?
Yeah. So I had that sense, and then I'm watching something happen on the news that, obviously this is going to be like the largest conflict in Europe since the end of World War II. So it's a historical event. And of course I wanted to go help people, right? Like that's part, I didn't just come over there, excuse me, just, out of boredom. But like, I've seen a lot of Americans that have gone over there and they try to make it as though they're completely altruistic. And I think there's always like a combination of factors that drive somebody to do something.
Of course.
And if anybody that says adventure is not part of it is kind of lying, right? Like you're not being completely honest. Of course it was interesting and exciting, but that can't be the only reason. You're just a rubbernecker on the road if that's the only reason you're going. But I would be dishonest if I didn't say that I was like, first of all, I want to verify that what's going on is actually what's being reported on the news.
We'll dive into that. I've got some questions around that. Yeah.
And then, part of it is the genuine curiosity. When you see thousands of like women with their kids that are just packing up and like leaving their home, like imagine what kind of a terror would cause like an American mother to just pack her kids up in a car and drive across the Canadian border with no plan and nowhere to go, right? That would be...
And maybe not even have gone to Canada before.
No,
a new land, a new territory, a new area.
Exactly, right? So something that would drive people to that kind of extreme, what is really going on, right? What's really happening? So that just a desire to kind of figure that out.
So let's dive into it, man. What was really going on? Like what's the reality from your eyes being over there on the front line, seeing it, working with the Ukrainian military as an American, being in different situations? Like tell us the truth, man. Like that's what we want to hear.
So the first thing that I think most Americans don't get is the scale of what's going on, right? If you are near the front lines, it is constant artillery, like never-ending artillery all the time. Some type of ordnance is going off, and this is happening over a front line that's over 1,000 kilometers long.
Yeah, not small.
No, it's a big area. Ukraine's about the size of Texas. I think it's just a few percentage points smaller if you looked at it on surface area. But so it's a pretty big place, and when you look at the scale of that, it really kind of illustrates how important this is to Russia and how strong their will is to exert their influence over Europe. Right? They're not. It's not a secondary issue for them, right? It's very important.
It's the issue.
It is the issue for them. Yeah. So, maybe it didn't start that way. Maybe they started out thinking it really was going to take 3 days, and they underestimated the amount of resistance they would see. But in their unwillingness to kind of say, okay, maybe we screwed this up, they doubled down, and now they have to do it. Right?
Now they're in it. They're stuck.
Yeah, and now their economy is basically tied to the war, so they really can't stop. Right?
Wow, I didn't think of it from that perspective of how they operate in their economy.
Well, it wasn't that way, but in order to supply their troops, they had to basically gear up. A significant portion of their working age males are in Ukraine. 800,000 have been wounded or killed, roughly, and what's left is basically dedicated to building, a huge portion of their economy is dedicated to building weapons and ammunition and things like that. So if the war stops tomorrow, Putin has to look at those workers in the face and be like, okay, you're unemployed now. So
yeah,
that's a hard thing to do. Yeah. Right. And it's even like Eisenhower said, I think it was Eisenhower at the end of World War II, he said, beware of the military industrial complex. And they've kind of gotten themselves into that position now. It's like, what do you do with this monster? So.
Yeah, because I know back in the day at MIT, being from Boston, I remember in the news they were talking about with the war in Iraq that they forcefully were shutting down some of the labs at MIT for some of the things that they were making because they didn't want it to still be funded and be tied back to the government. Mm-hmm. So it's just an interesting concept around like the level that's tied to the war continuing.
Yeah.
from an economic
Well,
standpoint.
and then you have to think too, with all the sanctions going on, right? People in Russia have to earn a living, and money has to cycle,
has
right?
to flow.
So they have to be earning money doing something. And if you remove the war industry, they can't do business with anybody outside the country. So, or very little. So
Very little.
what are they going to do?
Yeah.
So there's not much else Russia really knows how to do, like as a nation, right? They don't have a very good industrial base when it comes to like machining or, computers and technology and things like that. They pretty much outsourced most of that.
Yep.
And prior to the war, their entire economy was based on like crude resources. They would sell it to somebody else. They'd refine it. They do have refineries there, but that's where their income came from, right? Was
From the land.
selling minerals.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that you don't think the media is showing folks in the U.S. that you've seen on the front lines is the scale.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can like criticize the media for not being able to show that, because it's like.
But this is a bigger. There's more at stake. This is a bigger war, bigger issue than most Americans.
Yeah, it's
are
not
being fed information.
It's not
around.
a skirmish.
Yeah.
It's not a skirmish. This is a big fight.
And where do you think the war is at right now as far as who's winning?
I think it's tactically a stalemate. It's really hard to tell because both sides obviously are going to keep total numbers and assets and things like that sort of close to the vest. And I'm not in a position to have insider information on what's really going on. But I do know
you can catch a vibe, and you can talk to a lot of people that do have some level of intelligence on the front line.
Yeah, I mean,
you can see the regression, and
you can do the math. Like you'll see on the news, like the pro-Russian crowd will be like, "Look, we won some territory today," and they'll zoom in on the map to where the whole map is like 1 kilometer wide, and they took a tree line, and they're like, "Fucking getting it done today," And I'm like, "Yeah, Ukraine's the size of Texas." So if you look at what Ukraine's doing, they're putting up a resistance, but they're not going to die for a piece of dirt, right? They're not willing to just stay there and plant their feet in the ground and be like, I'm going to die for this one sunflower field.
Yeah.
It's not important to them to do that, and that's the right way to do it. So they're doing kind of what I guess you could describe as like a fighting withdrawal, where you'll run into some Ukrainian defenses. They'll, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. War is about killing people and breaking their things, right? So.
Yep.
The Russians will advance, they'll kill as many people and break as many things as they can, and then they'll back up to the next set of defensive lines. And that's kind of the game plan. And I think on both sides are just trying to kind of continue the current pace until the other side gives out, right?
Yeah.
And I think both sides really need a break or really need something to change. I don't think the current state of things is sustainable for either side indefinitely.
Wow.
It isn't, right? Like you can't keep this. Nope.
Yeah.
It has to end.
Money,
at some point.
resources.
Yeah,
like someone's got to take.
It's too much.
An advantage.
It's too much. Sooner or later, something gives on one side or the other.
Yeah.
And then it just the really hard part is being able to predict which side breaks first.
What do you think your cousin JD Vance is doing, and Trump coming into administration around the stance of the United States and this war in general?
So the one thing I can say about Trump, I don't know him, right? I've never met him. I don't know him at all. But the one thing that I can say about Donald Trump is he is predictably unpredictable, right? So I don't know that I'm willing to go down that rabbit hole of trying to predict what that goddamn guy's going to do. And the other thing I'll say about Trump, and this is something that, I worked in the oil and gas industry during his first term. And knowing that Russia's like predominant source of income was oil, the things he did during his first term were not friendly to Vladimir Putin.
Really?
They weren't. No, it hurt. Like it hurt Gazprom significantly, right? So when you think about a nation whose entire income, right, is basically crude oil exports and then weapons exports, which they're not going to ever have again because their weapons are dog shit and everybody can see it. When you take a nation like that, the U.S., a Texas company whose only overhead is paying its employees, right? We can get oil out of the ground for fairly cheap and still make money. They have to provide free health care. They have to provide schools. They have to build the roads with that money. So their break-even cost even though just getting the oil out of the ground and looking at Gazprom, but the nation has to make enough money to where their break-even cost is actually significantly higher than it looks like on paper. So if it gets below a certain price, they're kind of hemorrhaging money, or they have to cut programs and things like that. So it's really hard to prosecute a war when you're losing money, or prepare for one, right? So those things were not good for Russia, making them compete on that market, right? And even if Russia sells things on the black market, it's like, why would I buy black market oil from Russia and have to deal with that shit show? Because I'm sure that's not an easy group of people to deal with.
I was going to say the process is probably more strenuous with more risk.
And I'm sure reliability is.
Yeah, there's not systems in place that a legitimate source would have that a black market would.
Exactly. Yeah. So why would you buy black market stuff if you can get legitimate stuff for the same price or cheaper? Doesn't make any sense. So it didn't help. Like Trump, there's that narrative that him and Putin are like hanging out in some golf course in Moscow, and Trump doesn't like Putin, and I don't think Putin likes Trump. I think they respect each other for
aggressiveness in the role that they're in, and how they position themselves.
Yeah, the way I kind of see them is like two boxers in the first round, like feeling each other out all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a great analogy.
They're not disrespecting each other.
Throwing a little jab here, maybe an uppercut, but you're not hitting with that right hook and knocking the other one down.
But in boxing terms, that's a show of respect, right? Yeah. Because it's like, okay, let me figure you out before I start taking risks. And I think that that's kind of where things are with Trump. And, my cousin too, like I think that politics is one of those things where it's kind of a game. You got to say what you got to say to get elected. And then, I mean, since the dawn of politicians, they say what they have to get elected, and then they do what they need to do once they're in office. So, and, I think Trump is more intelligent than the left gives him credit for.
Yeah.
Significantly more intelligent than the left gives him credit for. And I think the same with my cousin. They're smart. I think they know, I think they understand the security concept of what's going on in Europe and how it would affect us if.
Yeah. Did you happen, and I'm sure, I mean, being overseas, you probably didn't, but did you see any of your cousin's podcast interviews? On Joe Rogan and all that?
Yeah, I watched it.
Was it bullshit?
No.
That was actually him?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he
talking about his family and his kids, were saying shit and swearing, and he was like, "I gotta fix this."
Listen to me, you know what I mean?
He likes to drive his own car. He's not like this dude that's like, I'm in the government and this is all great, because how he positioned himself. Normal dude.
He is a normal dude.
Normal dude.
That's the one weird thing about me having a relative that's a politician now, right? You normally see him and they're talking heads on TV, and you just immediately filled with this sense of that guy's full of shit.
Yeah.
Right? That's just the first initial reaction is this guy's a scumbag. He's lying to me. JD, his book, right? I was there for portions of that. I mean, we didn't live together when we were kids. I'd see him on the summers. We lived in different places, but, I was there for portions of that. The house that he talked about, that's where I spent my summers as a kid. I know it's real. As a matter of fact, he talks about his upbringing, and I don't want to piss anybody off by saying this. It's probably diminished in how
it was more aggressive, more.
His childhood was worse than the book. Made it sound. If you were going to ask me for an honest opinion, if there's any dishonesty, it's that he. And I'm sure the editors of the book he probably wrote the truth, and the editors are like, Jesus Christ, man, we don't want people to fucking walk into traffic after they read this.
Yeah. So,
he did have a hard childhood. That's not fake. That's all real. How he met his wife is real. You know what I mean? I remember her coming over to visit. She's a great woman. You know what I mean? I have nothing but positive things to say about her.
I don't know how he met his wife. How did he meet his wife?
Met her in college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Met her at Yale.
Yeah.
But the whole story about that, it's all true.
It's legit. Yeah, there's no fabrication.
He's not lying. No.
Yeah.
No. If you saw the movie, I think they did left some things out. You know what I mean? There's but it's a fucking
Hollywood.
Poetic license.
Yeah.
Full of shit. But
all of it, right?
Yeah. Ron Howard's not going to like this. You know what I mean?
But I appreciate you giving us the honest perspective on that, because, being his first cousin, growing up with him, spending those summers, like I saw the photo of you guys, tag stamped and the old school printout photo, right, with the yellow at the date. And I'm like, that's normal to me, meaning we probably all have some type of photo around that in the summer and the setting and things like that. And it didn't paint a picture for me when I looked into JD, when I did a little bit of research on you, and when Steve and I were talking, who introduced us, it just came across as normal shit.
He is legitimately
normal shit.
He's legitimately small town America, lower class income, if you want to put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Low income family, legitimately pulled himself up by the bootstraps and got himself into Yale, and he should be given credit for that, right? Like, not many people do that.
Totally.
He deserves the credit.
Do you think this is him becoming the vice president is going to change that approach? Meaning, like, do you think this will change him and his personality and how he responds and talks to the family and all, more on the human side, not so much the politics side?
We'll see. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't see how it couldn't change you somewhat. Jesus. You know what I mean? Like,
you Secret Service is what? Always around 24/7?
Yeah. It's got to
365.
It's got to have an effect on your psychology in some way.
How you show up and that level of, are you ever alone?
Yeah, which I would get aggravated with that. I couldn't do it. Like, even we had a few other like Westerners with me, you know what I mean, in the area I was at, and I just have to be alone sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, hey, I'm going for a walk, but like, they'd be like, I'll go with you. And I was like, I would literally rather stab myself in the ear with an ice pick than fucking have you go with me. But okay, you know what I mean?
The whole point is for me to just go think and be alone and spend my quality time.
I need some me time for like 30 minutes,
Yeah.
So
Totally.
So yeah, I don't know if I could do the constant entourage.
So with all that being said, with your experiences in Ukraine, your cousin having such a prominent role in government, where do you stand with all this?
Like on the politics side?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, when I first went over there, I was kind of indifferent in terms of the political. I didn't know, right? Like, I didn't really know anything about that area or what was going on. Let me
ask you this. What drove you there? Your hate for Russia?
No.
Your people losing lives? Like, you just wanted to see it yourself?
Well, I wanted to see it myself, obviously, because of like these mothers leaving in the middle of the night. I knew something really bad was going on, right? So that starts to make you think, well, maybe Putin's a dick.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for lack of a better term. So, but I want to see it for myself. I want to know exactly what's going on. So I went, and it's kind of like, I just want to inform myself instead of relying on some
platform.
Yeah.
That could be true and could not be true.
Some bullshit artist on TV telling me what to think. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm going to go figure it out for myself. Now, when I got over there, some of the things I saw, confirmed that suspicion that Putin's probably a dick. There were some pretty bad things happening up north of Kyiv, like during the initial invasion that I saw the aftermath of. That once you see that and it's confirmed, it's like, okay, and now you start meeting people and making friends, and then it's like, oh, I'll go home and go back to work in the oil field, and you know what I mean? And you start to feel like a piece of shit because these guys that are basically, to me, I'm fucking old. I don't need to be, you know what I mean? And you see them, to me, they're kids, right?
Yeah.
So,
but you're seeing people putting their life on the line day in, day out.
Yep. And
how do you pull yourself back out of there and go, oh, I'm just going to go back to the U.S. for a couple of years, and if you guys are still here, still fighting, we'll see you in 3 years.
Yeah, good luck, guys,
Which we know isn't, or what you were saying earlier is they can't sustain this for 3 more years the same way that's happening.
I don't think either side could at the rate that it's going on right now. But yeah, and then the other thing is not just kids, right? But they're kids that, by like the U.S. military definition, right? I was a Marine. And a Marine.
You were a Marine when you were 18, right?
Yeah. 17 actually, but
yeah.
So, by the U.S. Marines definition, these guys, a lot of these kids that were volunteering, of course, necessity driving them to the front, wholly unprepared for what they were heading into. So it's
So
like,
with your military background, being a Marine at 18, being in the gas and oil, industry, being on that side of it, foreign affairs, all of it, you're now on the front line of Ukraine with your training, your relationships, your resources. You have an advantage compared to Ukrainian citizens who are just getting tossed on the front line. And you haven't even been active in your military life for years, but you came in more prepared, more resourceful, and you didn't even know what was going on over there. You just showed up.
Well, now, and let me say this as well, because I don't want to make it sound like there was not a single Ukrainian that knew how to fight. They did have like a professional military, but like before the war, and those guys are actually really good troops. But
what I'm saying is there
there were so many people going in that weren't prepared.
Coming in, and it's just like, okay, here's a gun, here's a uniform, let's go. Like, what was it like?
Kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was kind of like that. I mean, it wasn't that dramatic where it's like, enemy at the gates where they're handing them their first rifle, like as they're walking into combat. And they'd get, these guys, at least with the experience that I saw, they'd get linked up with a unit. They'd do like some small minor training things that at least familiarize themselves with their weapons, make sure they had equipment. That's one thing they do seem to be pretty good about, at least the unit I was with. That they were at the very least, were making sure that the guys had the gear they needed, which is a massive importance, right?
A necessity, at least. Yeah.
But combat is such a complex environment that it's really hard to describe to somebody who hasn't been in it. But it's like, imagine being in a boxing match. Like, I'm going to keep making boxing references, but imagine being in a boxing match. That's scary enough. Now imagine being in a boxing match where you have to coordinate with other humans, right? And now imagine being in a boxing match where a guy has like 10-foot arms and can hit you from outside the ring, and you have to worry about that guy too. Like, it's really hard to make an analogy that makes sense. There's so many variables, and then just the variable of like human connection, of being able to communicate properly and efficiently with the people next to you, is so hard to do that it's not even just about, can this guy shoot his rifle, right? Does he know how to dig a fighting position? Right? Those are easy things to teach somebody.
Yeah.
Teaching people how to work together as a group is extremely hard. It's not hard theoretically, but it takes time, right?
Yeah.
So
it takes effort. It takes relationships.
You have to. Yeah.
It takes failure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in this case, that failure could lead to death.
It is death.
At the highest level of risk in our lives,
100%.
right? I mean, you fail, you make a mistake. It's not just you that potentially doesn't have a pulse.
It's the people around you. Yeah.
Everybody around you.
Yeah. And that's it's like in a normal job, you can make a mistake and you got 8 bosses coming around to tell you about it and tell you to put a cover sheet on your TPS report, right? But sorry.
Great reference. Great reference.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Office Space.
But if you do that in that environment, right, certain mistakes can get you killed. And then the other thing that happens is sometimes it's like speeding, right? So speeding's dangerous, but you don't necessarily die the first time you do it. So that's another thing that happens because you don't have these like wide-ranging standard operating procedures and these like brand new units. So then a guy makes a mistake and he survives it and he goes, well, that's okay. That's an acceptable thing to do. And then other people start to do it.
That becomes an SOP, but that SOP actually will drive you closer to death. It just didn't happen for the guy who did it the first time and the second time.
Exactly, right? So it's one of those things that like most of the SOPs that we have, and that's, in the U.S. military, those were written because somebody didn't do them or did do them and it killed somebody.
Yeah.
So now we have
it's almost reverse over there.
Well, and that's one of the things that like I've been kind of bringing up, but I'm just an average dumbass American that went over to Ukraine, right? Nobody's going to listen to me. So they're just like, all right, cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for your advice. But,
and your advice is like
my advice
strategic process improvement, standard operating procedures.
You can literally download the mission planning process from the U.S. Army. Just steal it. Like, it's on the internet. Don't relearn the same lessons, right? Like, don't relearn them the same way we learned them.
The hard way.
Yeah, exactly. Just take it and do that. But the other really difficult thing,
I think that's a lesson for everybody in life is, mitigate the time, mitigate the risk, mitigate the energy and effort, and just go do what other people have already built and are doing, so you don't have to go through it the hard way.
Yeah.
And you can mitigate the time for learning it, implementing it, failing, and then succeeding, because they've already gone through all those processes.
Exactly. Steal it, right? Like,
so whether it's a business, whether it's the war plan, whether it's
engineering, right? If you're building a machine and you're like, well, I can engineer all new proprietary parts for this machine, or I can find out who makes a drive shaft or whatever, right? And just buy it, right? Like, it's already built. I don't have to redesign it. It works. And you just put that in there, and that saves you, months of like lab testing on
R&D and
what's
fitting
the sheer
it
what's the sheer strength of this piece of shit? I don't care. Is it enough? They already built it. They did the testing.
Done.
Shove it in there, right? So it's kind of the same thing, but for processes. And then, I don't know that in the time we have a podcast, I can kind of completely break down the entire training process that would take place, but essentially the control of it needs to be kind of centralized so you can maintain a minimum standard of training. Yeah. And then also you have to allow for the time, which is hard given the circumstances, but you must.
It's similar to how I would give an outlook on business, right? Like, you've got to systematize it. You've got to bring it to the level of viability and then scale it.
Yes.
So like,
yeah.
if
so you do
not
like
those processes,
you do like a beta test with a small group, and then you prove it works, and you just start scaling up over time. But for me, it's like,
but with time coming in with a lacking number of infantry compared to Russia,
right,
and funneling all these people in without the system, without the process, it's going to make scaling harder.
It is.
Right. And so if you look at it from a business and on paper, you would say that's not going to work. Right.
Yeah.
But in real life with humans and bodies and pulses.
The reality, though, is as hard as it is to kind of implement it and perfect it, it costs more not to. Right.
It's always that lesson of invest now for a brighter future.
Yes. It's hard to do it. It's hard to give up. It's hard to pull that money out of your pocket and hand it to somebody, but you have to do it.
Yeah.
And then for Ukraine, I think the biggest problem that they face is however the shooting stops. Right, whatever the cause of that is, whether it's, I don't foresee a future. Unfortunately, I don't see a future in which Ukraine just forcibly pushes Russia all the way back to the Russian borders. Right, like something very dramatic would have to change in order for that to take place. So what I anticipate is that there's some kind of a negotiated ceasefire. Right, and the problem with that is, I think in the eyes of Russia, that will just be a timeout. That's halftime, right? And 4 years, 5 years from now, maybe, however long it takes them to rebuild, maybe they wait for Trump to not be president anymore so they don't piss him off. They'll come back, right? And they'll do it again. Unfortunately, 5 years from now, they will have rebuilt and they will have learned their lesson. And, they will have analyzed the mistakes they made during this attempt, and they'll have time to kind of fix those and change things. And, like the West is pretty fickle, right? They have short memories. So as soon as the shooting stops, Western Europe, the U.S. is like, cool, man, we're all friends again, and
this never happened.
And Russia's not going to look at it that way. You know what I mean? And whatever they say,
their planning is going to continue.
100%.
Their strategy is going to continue. Their scalability is going to continue, because if they're going to come back, they need to get the advantage of the day after it ends, that they're still working towards the next opportunity, whereas Ukraine needs to realize that it's not over, and they need to continue to build.
Start these processes now while everybody's attention is focused on it, right? While you have the assistance. And then for the Ukrainians, right, that, like I know, like Zelensky's constantly, saying, I want security guarantees. Well, there's no guarantee better than the one you provide yourself, right? There is no guarantee better. Right. Everything else is a piece of paper. That's all it is. And they can just be like, oh, my bad. Forgot about that promise. You know what I mean? So for the Ukrainians, to me, it's very important for them to start this process and professionalize it as much as possible, as soon as possible. It is going to take time. Like, if they started tomorrow, it wouldn't be fully, going for months, years, maybe. Right.
Yeah.
But during that process, things continually improve, right? So, but if they don't do it and the war stops, a lot of the funding and support and things like that will stop with it. And then some of those guarantees are going to be like joining NATO or NATO adjacent, or continuing that process of kind of flirting with NATO and trying to court, that membership. And without those kind of training standards, they will not pass the scrutiny of NATO acceptance.
Gotcha.
They won't.
So this has to happen.
It's going to happen eventually. It's easier for them if they start doing it. The sooner the better, right? Is essentially where I'm getting.
That brings me to my next point in our podcast, in our conversation today. We are actually going to bring in a special guest question. So we haven't done this before on the podcast, so this is the first time. And our special guest is Steve Bach. He's the gentleman that introduced us. And Steve had a question that I think fits this perfect segment. So you had just mentioned they might as well do this now while they have some of the assistance, some of the funding, some of the resources. Steve's question to you, Nate, is, do you believe that Ukraine and the issue at hand is best suited to be funded by Americans?
Well, I have two ways to answer that. One is I think that was a question better asked in 2022. And the reason being, part of one of America's number one exports is security, right? And in order to provide security for people, right, that's how we get business deals. Is, we'll look after you, we'll watch your back, but we get, we get a good trade deal out of this somehow, right? That's kind of how it works. Another way to look at it is like protection money, which sounds a little more nefarious, but
reminds me of old school Boston Irish mob.
Yeah. But so part of the ability to provide people security and make them actually trust you is you have to keep your word, right? So whether it was Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or whoever was in the White House, when they said, "We got your back," that's not Joe Biden saying, "We got your back." That's America saying it. And people that didn't vote for Joe Biden might not like it, but he got elected and was the representative of the United States, right? That's how it works. So if you crawfish on people, you start to lose your status. The next time you are like, "Hey, we kind of have an interest in this region of the world, and we want to be here," and then that country's going, "Well, I know when you get tired of it, you're just going to say fuck you and leave me here, and then I'm going to get killed."
Look what you did to Ukraine. Why don't you do it to us?
Exactly. And the other thing that I think is a negative aspect of going back on your word is when you look at China and Taiwan. If China does the calculus and says, "We can wait 3 years," you know what I mean? We can keep it up for 3 years. That's long. We can absorb that. We got a population problem anyway.
Yeah.
Who cares, right? Then that starts encouraging people to say, okay, now the calculus is, as long as you can last longer than 3 years, you're good.
So it's almost putting the United States in a standard or in a situation that is going to set them up for failure in the future and mitigate our biggest export, which in your case, you're saying is us providing security.
It's one of them, yeah. I mean, that's where our influence globally comes from, in my opinion. I'm sure somebody will argue with me about it, but
hopefully they do. That means it's a good opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care if they do. I'm still going to have it. So
you're saying because we committed to this, you're saying, yes, we have to continue to provide resources, aid, and funding.
Yeah, I mean, we got to stay the course. The second part of my answer to that is I think that the Biden administration, obviously I was there. I was using American weapons while I was there, right? So on one hand, I'm grateful for the fact that assistance was given, but I can also recognize that it's like kind of inefficient and sloppy.
Gotcha.
Right? And that there's nothing wrong.
Why do you say that?
It's just the manner in which they allocate like the funds. So when they say, okay, we sent this much money, well, first of all, a lot of it's not money. It's just a dollar value attached to a thing. So if they send an old M113 that was built in the Vietnam War, that's, sitting out in the desert and somebody's spending money to maintain it, they send that's $1.2 million or whatever the allocated fund is for it. So is that thing really worth $1.2 million to the U.S.? It's costing us money, and we're never going to use it.
Yeah.
Right? So how was that cost, dealt with? And then, like earlier, I said, war's about killing people and breaking their shit. So, I've seen where millions of dollars, and don't get me wrong, this is not like an anti-woman statement, but I did see where, several $1 million was, for, psychologist for women's health, which, don't get me wrong, that's important, but you got to prioritize importance, you know? So things like that are not, to me, if we're aiding Ukraine and killing people and breaking their stuff, if it doesn't directly involve killing people and breaking their stuff, then it's worthless.
Yeah.
Right? In that,
well, why are we funding
in that endeavor? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Especially when they're asking for specific funds for specific things.
Exactly. So, and then I think that there's, you know, probably on our end that there was people abusing those contracts. Something I can't prove, but I mean, that's how it works, right?
A friend of a friend gets a contract. And
and it's
XYZ goes to them.
It'll cost me
$300
million to get this plane to Ukraine. You know what I mean? Some ridiculous shit like that. I'm sure it's happened time after time. There's so much money flowing around and so many numbers that something slipped through the cracks somewhere. I'm sure of it.
What do you say to the American that received $770 after they just lost their home in the LA fires? Knowing that there's millions and millions and millions going to Ukraine.
Did they even get $770?
I think it's something just came out saying that they're going to give them $770. And more home and close to and dear to our heart here, and as we sit in Nashville, Tennessee, is they got like $700 in North Carolina as well.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so it's like, and you see all these folks in losing their homes, and there's no water and there's no heat and all these things. What do you say to those people that just lost everything and got $700?
That's a hard one to answer. The one thing I do know is when most people say we're giving all this money to Ukraine, most of it's not going to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right?
Where's it going?
Lockheed Martin, Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, right? Because that's what happens. It's going to the Department of Defense. So essentially what happens is the DOD sends something and then they go, okay, we need the funds to replace that. And that's the money that got sent to Ukraine. So it's a thing. And like when you look at some of our Patriot missiles, right? Everybody goes, oh, those things are so fucking expensive. How can we send those over there? They have a shelf life. You have to use them or you have to spend a ton of money taking them apart to get rid of all the fuel and replace the seals and all that. It costs more to refurbish them than it does to just shoot them and build new ones. In some cases, right? Like I might be off on some of those numbers, but like, so you're
seeing it from the perspective and from your education perspective too, knowing that like, okay, they sent over this, but this is how the process works.
Yeah,
and it's inflated, and some of that inflated cost is coming back to a private party that sold it in the United States.
Yeah.
So when you say all that money is going to Ukraine, not all of it is, but it is being spent. It's just not going to Ukraine in natural United States fashion.
Yeah,
it goes back into someone's pocket with a sideways deal. And
it's not as clear as it looks. Like when people see that $180 billion like total, they look at it and think that like, the government came to everybody's house in the United States, collected $180 billion and sent a plane full of cash over to Zelensky's house. And that's not what happened. You know what I mean? That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Now, am I 100? I don't know. Nobody knows. That's the thing. Like, I don't think there's any single human that could tell you where every dollar went. So I can't certainly provide an answer.
That's why most of it's probably going back into private companies' pockets because there is no system to track it, to analyze it, to really find that outcome, that usage of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you probably even couldn't. You could have a congressional investigation and be more confused at the end of it than we were at the beginning. So
don't call JD and ask him to do that. He'll spin him in sales.
He's probably going to do it anyway. I think he's pretty fired up about it. But looking into how that money was spent and was it spent efficiently and was it spent properly? Was it really even spent or was it just a fake moving numbers around? Right. I'm totally okay with that. Like that's not inappropriate at all. The taxpayers deserve that. And I think that Ukraine can be helped and helped equally without spending so much money if it's done efficiently and properly, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, training infantrymen is next to free in terms of military style spending, right? Rockets.
Based on what that costs compared to equipment costs.
It's like nothing, right?
Capital expense.
Fire some small arms rounds, you know what I mean? That's like nothing, right? That's pocket change. You wouldn't even notice it.
Yeah.
And that could have a very dramatic effect on, people staying alive. So
instead of tossing all the tech or the big cranes or the stuff that's not being used or whatnot, spending that time, effort, energy, and minimal expense and resource as far as monetary value goes in the people. So investing in people.
Well, like, yeah.
Because that will go a long way with a smaller budget.
Well, and if you look at like any business, right? I mean, if you go look at like, I don't know, a manufacturing plant, is that business their machines? Or is it the people that run them?
It's the people that run them.
It's the people. That's the difference. That's the difference, right? And like me, I worked for hydraulic fracturing companies. And you got Halliburton, all these big companies, and they got a bunch of cool, crazy, all the fancy screens, touch screens on their shit. We were always like, had raggedy ass shit, but it worked, right? And most of the guys that worked for us were like old Halliburton hands and, guys that had worked in that industry for a long time. And that was kind of the difference, is like, we don't have the fanciest shit in the world, but we'll knock your job out faster.
Yeah.
And more efficiently and safer and all of those things, because we know what we're doing. And I'm not saying Halliburton's unprofessional. Don't get me wrong. They're good. But,
I know what you're saying.
The
driving force is human connection and relationships, not necessarily the tech asset.
And that's important to some, a lot of customers, but it's not the machinery. You can have the best machinery in the world, and an idiot can crash it, right? So,
totally. All that being said, where do you play a role in this now that you're back in the U.S. and sit here in Nashville today?
Well, so it's unfortunately, because I'd rather just remain anonymous, right? Would be a much easier existence for me. But unfortunately, the way the world works is if you got to be the squeaky wheel, I guess, to kind of get what you need done, or have money, right? So I don't
be silent with billions.
Yeah, you could do that, and you could just pay somebody else to get it done. But I don't have a bunch of money, so I guess I got to run my mouth about this, what I think could help these guys, right? And so part of that, I guess I'll just say, I'm like 99% done with a book. I got about 85,000 words written. The difficult part about finishing it is I'm kind of living the last chapter talking to you, right? This is part of it. So, but then I'm also in the process of like looking for, I guess, literary agents and publishers and things like that. So,
yeah. What's the book about? You said you're living it. Is it the last few years of your life?
Yeah. No, it's about Ukraine. And essentially, like, one of the things that I learned, not necessarily in the military, but at work, is you don't get better by focusing on the things you do well. You get better by focusing on the things you suck at, right? And it's hard for people to do because they have to admit that they're not good at something. And like for men, especially, they don't like it, right?
Got to cut down that ego.
Oh, yeah. But
be a little vulnerable.
Yeah. But it's okay, right? Like, we're not good at everything. We make mistakes. Mistakes are a part of the human condition.
Yeah.
We're going to make them. I think the only infallible one ever, Jesus, I'm pretty sure, like, he's supposed to, and even he had his doubts, you know what I mean? So,
it's human nature.
It is human nature, and it's fine. As long as there's nothing wrong with making a mistake as long as you're willing to admit it and sit down and learn from it. It becomes sinful when you just ignore it or just say, well, it's just, it's bad luck today.
Yep.
So
you didn't learn from it.
100%, right? Then you're going to do it again. And in that environment over there, that's dead people, right? That's somebody that's not going home.
Yeah.
So, basically the book is about, most of these like modern war books are like, and there I was standing over the bodies of 10,000 dead terrorists that I killed single-handedly, and first of all, those are all bullshit. Nobody kills that many people. It doesn't work that way. They don't want to die. They're not just going to stand there and let you shoot at them. So most of them are bullshit and they're kind of braggadocious, but this is basically about mistakes we made, and kind of analyzing like how would
mistakes we made, meaning
me and the guys I was with,
yeah.
right? Like it's not, I'm not bragging on myself, I mean, it's funny, right? I'll tell some funny stories about my buddies, some cultural differences between us and the Ukrainians.
The truth, the reality.
Yeah, it's just real shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's just really how it is. You do dumb shit, you know what I mean? Like, there was one time I kept tripping over the anti-tank missiles that are like, they have wires that are attached to them. So when they fly over you, they leave this little like copper filament on the ground, and they're like fucking tripwires. And it was muddy as hell, and I kept running. I got it on video. It's pretty funny, but I kept tripping on them, and I was like, motherfucker, god damn it. Every 2 steps I trip over another one. But it's that kind of shit. That's real war. Everybody thinks it's like a movie, and it's really just, it's like there's regular people that are in this really weird situation, and they just got to kind of figure it out.
I was just going to say, trying to constantly and continuously just figure it out.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I mean,
with your life at stake.
Yeah.
High risk.
You know.
So that all being said, man, like, and you know, I know there may be some stuff that you necessarily can't chat with us, and you know, may make sense not to, but like, what was a day like over there? Like, are you getting bombed? Are you seeing hundreds of thousands of drones? Do these drones have AK-47 strapped to them? Like we were joking about. Like, paint us a quick picture with what you can talk about, and I don't want to put you in a weird situation.
No. It's,
but like, what's the truth over there of like what a day looked like?
It's fine.
Today you woke up in a hotel, you got a good night's sleep, you had a free continental breakfast probably. I picked you up. We had a good conversation on the way over here. That is not the case. What, 4 days ago for you?
No, well, I mean, like I've been off the front for a few months because I was trying to kind of figure out like a training thing over there, but it's not. I got to be a little louder than doing it from over there. So that's what, you know, and then with the election turning out the way it did, there's probably some level of security issue with me just kind of running around independently. You know,
JD Vance's cousin is running around in Ukraine, and I just saw a video surface.
Potentially like a black van full of Russian dudes would pull up and jerk me in it and take me for a ride to Moscow or St. Petersburg. I don't know. Probably not, but I don't think I'm that high a priority, but it's always better to be safe. And
safer
then plus,
than sorry, especially in a country where you don't have all the resources you have here. And I know you have connections, and you've been there for a few, and you've made some great relationships. But like here, you are protected a little bit more.
Well, yeah, nothing's going to happen to me here. I don't honestly believe that anything would happen to me over there, but it does produce a certain potential security risk for the NATO. You know what I mean? Like if something did happen to me, now the vice president is like, oh my goddamn relative's a captive, right? So that hamstrings his ability to
leverage.
Yeah, it is. It's leverage against the highest office in the land.
He loses leverage.
Yeah, so it's not good, right? Like it's better for me to come home and get out of that environment, unless
things make sense.
Yeah,
and
there's proper security in place to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's really not fair to the incoming administration to have me in such a precarious position, kind of independently on my own, not communicating. You know what I mean? So
I get it. It makes sense, man.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Things are, especially with where we're at right now, especially with this administration coming in with 2 assassination attempts on Trump.
Yeah. You can't put anything past anybody.
You can't put it past them. And now JD is going to be standing right there with them in a lot of those settings. And
well, they keep them pretty separated after the inauguration, but it's still right. It's
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, they try not to be in the same place at the same time. Not very often.
Yeah.
But no, so like an average day, it kind of depends on what you're doing. So we'd have like kind of troop rotations. So you'd go to the front for a while, and
it's constant, right? There's constant. So artillery,
if you're on
comms are going crazy all the time, right? Like this isn't just you chilling in a bunker.
I mean, it depends on where you are. So there's like hot spots along the front that are like worse. So like right now, Pokrovsk is one of the worst places on the front. That's a bad place to be. That's going to be constant shit all the time.
Yeah.
But what's weird is when you say constant, you think literally 24 hours a day, you're just in gunfights like the movies. But you can't do that, right? Like it's not sustainable for either side to do that. You send a group of guys, maybe get told, take this, set of buildings over here. And then they go get in a fight. Somebody wins and somebody loses, right? The losing side that's it for them.
Yeah, they're done. Or they're retreating. Or
yeah. But it's over. And the amount of resources, when you think about like average loadout for an infantry troop is probably 80, 90 pounds. Right, and you can burn that up in an hour or two, right? And that's ammunition and water and food.
I was just going to say, and you're probably only holding 3 things, right?
Yeah. Well, water,
ammunition, water, and comms.
Yeah, listen, there's only 2 things you really absolutely must have in combat, and that's bullets and water, right? Everything else is like good to have, like radios, number 3. But like if you don't have it and you have bullets and water, you're not in terrible shape yet. But if you run out of bullets or water, you're fucking waiting to die.
Yep.
So those are
counting the clock.
Those are the big ones. Yeah.
So not fire 24/7, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's how I would look at it. I would look at those combat zones as it's just all day, all night.
You can't do this. So much resources,
and it makes sense. Resources, expense of the war, cost. What's up with the drones? Is there drones flying everywhere?
Those are fucking everywhere.
Yeah. So you would talk to me about it though. Like, you look up in the sky, you see like 100. 10,
oh, not that many.
2?
No, not that many. So like, you got to think like a drone that's up in the air can see for a pretty wide range. You know what I mean? It's got a pretty good coverage area.
Yep.
So why would you just fill them with like random 100? You know what I mean? You don't need it.
Yeah.
So, but
see, this is my ignorance to this,
No,
where
but
you're just like, you just broke that down. It makes so much sense.
yeah. So it's
But
like,
again, me as the American who doesn't have any experience in this, my perception is like what happened in Jersey. There's just all these drones everywhere.
yeah, and it's not necessary,
Yeah.
right? That's what makes me think whatever was happening in Jersey is probably pretty innocuous. And
Yeah.
like, you wouldn't need to do
Well,
that.
no one knows, and the media doesn't know. Well,
I mean, it's probably some goddamn college kids screwing around. That's what I would do. If I was at like a drone lab or something, I'd be like, let's fuck with everybody. You know what I mean? But
you look up, it's just middle fingers.
yeah, like let's take
It
out.
comes out of the drone and gives you the
just,
finger.
Let's just remove that little ID code in our radio frequency and just jack with people all day long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty good troll, right?
Works.
So yeah, I mean, it's like a Bigfoot scam, but in the sky. Fucking hilarious, I think, and it probably is. It's probably what it's going to turn out to be, is like the 2025 crop circles.
Yeah.
That version of it.
Yep.
But it's something stupid. It's not going to be, the Chinese aren't launching drones with goddamn blinking beacons on them.
I was just
It's
gonna,
the dumbest
gonna
thing.
say there's got to be some level of secrecy if we were under attack. Number one, and number two, would that even be at that level?
No.
Of getting up there?
There's no reason to have that
Exactly.
many, right?
Exactly.
You could observe with one, right?
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, that makes so much sense to me, and I didn't even think of it. I can only imagine who isn't thinking that way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I get why people might be freaked out or think something weird's going on, but it's like, we look at it and we're like, oh, cool, drones? Yeah. First time? Like, not that big a deal for us.
Matt King, who came on, he was like, drones have been around forever.
They have.
And
They've been around since the 40s.
most people in the military or have some type of background understand it and have seen it, whereas a lot of civilians, we haven't seen it.
No,
Right?
they think it's brand new.
And the only thing we see is like racing drones on like ESPN, right?
Yeah,
Like from a
yeah.
sport. And then we hear the negative usage
Listen,
of it.
if something is trying to be sneaky and kill you, you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially something flying around at night. If they don't want you to see it, you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that, like, if you had night vision in Ukraine, you could go out at night. Most of the Mavic drones that have like the thermals on them, most of the Mavic drones also have like the little like proximity sensors on them. So those actually emit infrared light, and your night vision goggles can see that. So
you can actually see it coming.
So you could look up at night and be like, oh, there they are. But usually the Mavic drones were just looking for shit. And then, so what they would do is they go up and they send a drone up, and it sees something. And then if they see something they want to shoot at, then they'll call artillery or mortars and they'll direct that to you. Or they can send in like kamikaze drones, which the rise and prevalence of the kamikaze drones was kind of really came to be because it was a stop loss measure for the Ukrainians to kind of try to replace artillery.
Yeah.
Right. So it's everything they kill with a kamikaze drone, they don't have to shoot 30 or 40 rounds of artillery at. So,
well, what's the cost of those drones?
$500 maybe.
So at
pretty
that
cheap.
point, if you can mass produce
Yeah.
and you can reduce costs, it could be a cost effective to actually do a kamikaze opposed to putting a real human on the line and tons of artillery shells and all that.
There is some like use cases for them. The problem with drones, and I mentioned, I remember talking to guys about this in 2022. The weakness in the drones is going to be the radio connection between the controller and the drone itself. And anywhere there's radio communication, you can interfere with it and you can screw it up.
I was just going to say interference.
Yeah. I mean, you interfere, you can actually hack into it if you have the right technology. And then like most of those, the other thing about it is anywhere there's a radio frequency, so the drone itself is sending the broadcast back to the thing.
Yep.
But that broadcast is really traveling at 360 degrees from the drone. So if you have the right passive equipment, drones are coming way before they get there.
Gotcha.
So like one thing about artillery is the Army did a study, and I'm probably going to screw up some of the percentages here, but I think they did it after, like during World War II or maybe Korea or something like that. But they said that like the overwhelming majority of casualties from an artillery strike occurred in the first like 30 seconds, because that's when people weren't in their bunkers, right?
Gotcha.
So the thing is, if you get warning that it's coming,
You're in
then
your bunkers.
you never have that 30-second window unless you catch people. Like that's why they use them when people are attacking, right? Because they have to get out in the open, right?
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
So there's limits to the drones. They're not like the answer to everything. They're good in certain circumstances, but they're not the end of war as we know it. There will be a countermeasure, and then things will have to adapt and change.
Gotcha. So drones are here to stay, you think?
They're here to stay in some capacity. I think in the ISR kind of role, like the tactical. So tactical ISR, so say like we're a squad, we have a drone pilot, we want to see what's over that next hill.
Yep.
You can pop it up, put it back down. But again, it's sending out a radio message while it's in the air. So, you get like in some way, if they have passive RF detection equipment, they're going to know you're there. So there's always a give and take with it. I think what kind of protects a lot of the drone operators on the front in Ukraine is there's so many of them that it's almost like radio frequency camouflage in a sense, right?
What do you which one do you intercept? Can you intercept them all at the same time? If there's 50 and you intercept 49, one's getting back to control.
The risk there is that you, the controller, also are broadcasting, right? So they'll either shoot the drone down, which we would do. Like if we saw Mavics flying over us, we'd just shoot them down. Sometimes they were ours. But, some other unit that's like down the line, and we're like, yeah, drone's not over me, ever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't like that shit at all. So if we could see them and hit them, we'd shoot them down. Or you just get underground and, wait it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, if they were hovering over us, you got to die. It's the wrong place.
You said shoot them down earlier when we were chatting. You said the resources and American guns. What are you using over there? What's in your hand?
What did I have?
Yeah. What you're using an American?
I had an M4 for a little while, and some American machine guns, 50 cals and Mark 19s. The 50 cal everybody knows, and then the Mark 19 is a fully automatic grenade launcher.
Gotcha. So you're equipped with that. The Ukrainian government gave you that to help fight against the Russians, and that was funded from the United States because they're American made.
Yeah, actually, what's weird though about the Mark 19...
And you sent me a picture. You had a Starlink at one point.
Yeah, we did have Starlink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was funded from American government.
So that you get both, right? So I think some of those were, sent, or the government picked up the tab for some of them. I can't remember exactly how that works. Like they did send some, and then some were like just like volunteer groups that would go out and buy a Starlink and send it over. But yeah, in a bunker, outside that bunker, there was a Mark 19, and that was basically what we were sitting there waiting to do. Like if they moved in this area, they'd call me up and be like, okay, go do that thing you do with a machine gun. And then, but so basically we're just playing a waiting game, like a little miniature mortar with that machine gun. And then we had a Starlink set up in there. So, you got like that Ukrainian kid that was with me was like, watching YouTube videos and
just passing time, and
you
guys are shitting in a pot, in a hut, in a bunker, shooting down drones, hoping that no one runs up on you, man.
Yeah, well, we were like the second line at that point, so we're basically shooting over our buddies to get to the bad guys. But like, that's like, and then the other thing you could do is they can broadcast what your drones are seeing, and then you can pick it up via the Starlink.
Oh, wow.
And watch what your drones are seeing. So if you see a bad guy, you just run out yourself and take care of it.
So you're actually getting the access almost
live stream.
Yeah. Wow. Technology, man. It's a new day, new age.
It's pretty nuts.
And was the Starlink legit? Like you had access every time that thing was on and powered and wasn't being shot at?
So that time we didn't. So I had a little and I don't know which ones. So I remember there was like a little bit of debate about, we have these things and then the DOD's picking up the tab. I didn't know if this one was or not, but I assumed it was. And so I was a little pissed off at Elon there for a while because I was like, listen, you took the DOD's money. I don't care what your politics are, but you took the cash. You got but I was joking around.
Yeah.
just in a bad place. You know what I mean? Trying to
make fun of it. Yeah.
Make
light of it.
Yeah. What else are you going to do? You know what I mean? You're stuck there. You're like, shit, we can't talk to anybody. But yeah, I mean, you saw that video I sent you. I mean, that's pretty much what the front looks like.
Yeah.
That's like that whole strip.
It's intense. I mean, it's a war zone. It's everything you would think it looks like in a movie, but knowing the tactics and the reality is so drastically different than what you would see in a movie.
It's
right?
worse.
Like
it's
the
worse
scenery
yeah.
was like, oh wow, that like as if you saw a movie and something just got bombed, but it didn't just get bombed. That's what you're living and fighting in day to day.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
and that what's weird about the movies is like they can show you the visual, like you said, but you can't get like in that town there was burnt bodies everywhere.
Really?
Right? Yeah. Like I mean, there was
not getting picked up.
There was a hell. No, you can't. No. You can't logistically. So I mean, but the Russians had held it. The Ukrainians pushed them out actually, and then we went in to kind of keep them out. And there was just like coming into the town. I mean, the entire roadway in was just burnout tank with skeletons hanging out of it. BMP, another tank, wow, an MRAP everywhere, right? Everywhere. You couldn't walk around outside without some piece of unexploded ordnance. You had to watch your step to avoid UXO. That's how much. I mean, that's a hell of a goddamn fight that went on there.
What's it smell like? What's it feel like?
I don't know that I can accurately describe rotting burnt flesh. I don't know how to describe that.
But that's what it is the whole time.
It's weird. It's like a mix, man. You get like. It's not everywhere, right? But like
no, but I'm talking about where you were, where that video you
in that
sent,
video,
like the reality of it is there is dead bodies everywhere. What is that like?
I mean, it's just like I know it sounds like indifferent, but it's just one of those things. You're like, all right, that's weird, but I just got to deal with it.
Yeah,
like it is what it is. I don't want to wind up like him, so just keep moving.
Yeah. So you're not necessarily sitting there thinking about your surroundings. You're more so thinking about how to not become your surrounding.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, that's, you have to, I guess. I mean, I don't want to sound like, you just turn into a machine. It's not like that, but you do just like, all right, I got a job to do. I got to focus on the job.
Yeah.
And then that's it. So if I'm like, when the Starlink went down, we had to go find another, communication point. So we had to get out and like, move across the town in the daytime, which is terrifying, so I'm like this the whole time. Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, literally looking over your shoulder and above, I would.
Yeah. I mean, where we were safe from like enemy infantry, but the drones and mortars and shit like that was the scary part. But yeah. So
mortars being, you got to look where you step so you don't blow off your legs.
No, those are landmines.
Okay.
Mortars are the tube.
That's
doink, you know what I mean? And
that are just dropping on you and you're done. Yeah. Gotcha.
So, which almost got me in that town. I thought I was like, this is it.
Really?
Yeah.
You had one of those experiences?
Yeah.
Tell us about it, man. Like, whoa, dude.
Well, no,
I didn't know you were that close to stuff. Meaning,
yeah.
I knew you were close, but I thought you were always on the like positive side, like the pressure side.
No, dude, it never works. There's no way to just be on.
Tell us about it, man. Right. I gotta hear about this.
So, like I said, our Starlink was down, and periodically we had to check in. So we did find out that there was another Ukrainian mortar position like down the road. So that video you saw, if you like walk out of that entrance and turn right down the road, these guys were there. And I don't know if it was just like you have sometimes where the Russians are shooting mortars at you like because they're targeting you. They want you to die, right? Yeah. They see you on a drone. And then sometimes they just fling like rando rounds in where the general area where they know people
could or could not be.
Just to harass them, right? Now, the weird thing about mortars is they make a sound. You can hear them coming, right? So you know they're coming. And like if you look at the back of them, they got that tail fin assembly with a bunch of holes in it.
Yep.
So it makes this like horrendous, like screaming whistle. It's not like the movies where it sounds almost melodic, like pew. It's like it's fucking terrifying, right? Like I don't care what anybody says when those things are coming in. You're like shit, right?
This is a terrible like comparison, but is it like a bottle rocket sound where it's like
close but worse? I don't know how to. I I can't describe it. You just have to have somebody shoot a mortar at you a few times, and then you'll figure out what I'm saying. But
I don't know if I want to find out, but yes.
But no, like, and then you can hear, because mortars have this like really high arc of fire, right? Because they were designed originally to fall vertically into trenches, right?
Yep.
So they designed them to fire up and high like that. But and then after a while, you get to where you can tell what size of the mortar is. So they got 82 millimeter mortars, so that's the diameter of the projectile, and then they got 120s. And they make kind of a different sound.
Yep.
And after a while, you start to learn when you hear that like screech, you're like, I'm good. That one's not for me. You know what I mean? And then you start to also learn like when they're close. And you don't have long. Like I don't want to make it sound like you have 5 minutes of hearing the scream.
Let me pack up my Starlink.
Yeah, I should probably get out of here. It's like you'll start to hear a scream, and you have basically just enough time to get to the ground. You know what I mean? And then it's already impacting. And this one, it was coming in, and I was like, fuck. And I remember that's all I thought. I was like, fuck. And I had time to get to my knee. And I took a knee, and I had some night vision goggles on. And it was at night. And I remember it went off, and it just was lucky that like the house that used to be there was this pile of rubble. So the mortar round itself, like what gets you is the fragmentation.
I was going to say the metal. Right?
Yeah, it's the shrapnel that'll get you. And I'm not going to try to claim how close it was, but I could feel the heat, right? It was cold out that night, and I could feel the heat off of it. And in my night vision, you could see the sparks. And I had like rocks and shit landing on me, and I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
And then hauled ass back to the bunker, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the guys in the bunker were like, you good? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. That was it. You know, it's just like, all right.
Didn't catch me today.
No,
yeah,
it's
on to the next.
Not my time.
Yeah.
But that's not even like an uncommon occurrence. That happened multiple times. But that was the one where I heard it coming, and I just kind of like went down to a knee.
You knew it was coming for you.
And I was like, fuck my life, dude. This is going to suck. And it just happened to kind of land in a hole. And that was the only reason I didn't get hit with something. Wow. I'm sure, but.
And then you still had some of that covering from the building that was.
No, I mean, I was like standing in a road.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was out in the open.
Wow.
But there
so
was
not where you were when you set that video. Gotcha.
No,
Okay.
I wasn't in that place. I was out in the street in front.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's not even unusual. So like most of those guys, and like a lot of these Ukrainian troops, I don't want to make it sound like I'm, the most experienced guy ever. I'm not even close to it. A lot of these guys have done much more than I have. And that's something that's like almost a daily occurrence if you're actively fighting on the fronts all the time.
Wow.
Right? It's not rare at all.
Wow. Last question I have for you, man. What do you wish to see with your cousin taking office in this new administration? Like, what do you have high hopes for?
Like, what's the one thing that I think I'm trying to think about? Like, I just want the government to be something we can trust again. I know that that's a long process, right? And like, you can't come in and be like, I'm an honest guy, and then everybody's like, cool, like,
yeah.
You're not going to earn it that way. It takes work, but that's what I want. It bothers me when I see the American people losing faith in their government.
Yeah.
I don't like it. But the government has earned their mistrust. So.
I was just gonna say, you can't get mad at it because there's a sense that I've lost a little bit of it too.
Yeah, me too.
And my hopes are that we can do stuff like this, and we can have conversations like this with truth and honesty, and hopefully just reach people that are listening to this today to get a good, true, honest. Like, there's no agenda in this conversation today, right?
No.
Like, you're not trying to push something. I'm not trying to push something. We're just having a conversation about your experiences and the reality and some of our opinions, right? Yeah. And people may disagree. Oh, great. They may agree. Yeah. Great.
Well, that's America.
But we should have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And it should all be out there for them, the listeners, the Americans, the audience, to decide themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to push. If there is any agenda, it's the truth. That's all.
Yeah, that's
whether you like it or don't like it.
Yeah, I don't care. Well, the truth doesn't give a shit how you feel about it. So,
exactly.
But that's where I'm at. I just want people to be honest, and I want Americans to have the ability to trust their government again. That's a much better life, right? It's a much better place to live when you know that the people that are kind of controlling a significant portion of your life aren't scumbags. So,
do you believe your cousin JD Vance will tell the truth in office?
he's a good man.
Yeah.
You can be married to people and they surprise you, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a good man. He's a real human being.
Yeah.
He's
You
not-
feel confident in that?
He's not a caricature. You know what I mean? Like most of them that are just playing a part. I think he's represented himself.
Awesome.
He said some things that are like not necessarily positive towards Ukraine. He has, but he also
Like
said,
what?
I think he was running for election as a senator in Ohio, and it's very popular in Ukraine. They show it a lot, but he said, I don't care what happens one way or another in Ukraine, which I get Ukrainians not liking to hear that. You know what I mean? But you also have to understand he's running for Senate in Ohio. He's not. He
There's
wasn't.
an audience to be speaking to.
He's speaking to a specific group of people
to earn a role that he was wanting to get.
Well, and as a senator,
reality there.
like foreign policy shouldn't be your number one priority, right? Your number one priority should be your constituents, and I think that's what he was trying to say. Maybe poorly worded, but I know him, I get it. I was like, I don't think it's as bad, But like with Ukrainians, I'm like, yeah, I know,
Yeah. But at what point do you say that? But them going, they heard it, they saw it, and that was it, right? Like there is no defense at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to come back. But again, right? Ukrainians don't elect him to Senate, right? So I get
he
it.
doesn't have any push, pull, or play in any foreign policy as a senator, right? Like
No.
his jurisdiction.
No, voting on bills. You know what I mean?
Bills,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
ultimately it's not his decision in a role he's in. More so today as vice president.
Well, even now, you know what I mean? Unless he becomes the president, the vice president doesn't have a huge foreign policy role unless I, am forgetting something from civics class. But it's been a while. Yeah. I'm fucking old.
What about the future? Do you want JD to run for president after Trump's last term?
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be pretty cool.
You think he's going to do it?
I'm sure. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. Like he might take a break after his, you know what I mean? Who knows, right? Yeah. He might take a break after that because, if you think about it, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be 4 years is a long way from now. I'm not even involved in it. I haven't spoken to him. It's like I shouldn't be commenting on his future plans, but it would stand to reason that, he would try to be on the ticket. So
that makes sense. How can folks get in touch with you? How can folks connect with you? You're writing your book. You're almost finished. I'm sure that you are going to be working with a publisher and someone's going to be picking this up. You've told me a little bit about your book off camera, and I don't want to give all the amazing nuggets out there, but it's something that I think is going to be absolutely amazing. How can people get in touch with you? And are you looking for someone to pick your book up soon? Is this something down the road in 6 months? Talk to me a little bit about...
I kind of want to start the process as soon as possible. As far as getting in touch with me, I might have to come up with some social media stuff that you can post in the link to the video because I'm kind of been off the grid. Right?
You mean you've been in Ukraine for 2 years? Well, I've been fighting a war?
Yeah, so I have some secondary accounts. I need to kind of create something. By the time this airs, you can post it.
Gotcha.
In the link. So I can't say it, but yeah. So I need to find a literary agent. That's one of the processes. But I looked up the process to find a literary agent, and you basically have to ask them out on a date. It's like flirting with a woman. You have to write them a letter and be like, I really like your work. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
So I started to write, it's called a query letter. And I started to write one. And I was like, I can't, dude. I might have to pay somebody to write my query letters because it's just not me. You know what I mean? I don't know how to do it.
But I think, doing more of this stuff, now that you're back, your feet are on the ground in the U.S., I think that might be a good way to go about it because you've got an amazing story. It's from the heart. It's the truth. And you lived it. And you're still living it today. And transitioning back, just alone, the transition back to the U.S. is a book in itself, let alone you including that transition in all the experiences you've had the last 24, 48 months.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see it come out, man. And I just want to say thanks for being here today. Thanks for spending time. Thanks for flying into Nashville to do this in person so we can have that good energy, those good vibes.
Yeah.
And thanks for doing what you do, man.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.